second to give the command.
Drivers, start your engines!
Dylan Larkin, of course, a star player for the Detroit Red Wings from Michigan, played at the University of Michigan also. Had a ride in the two-seater IndyCar the other day. Said he felt it in his stomach, kind of like a big roller coaster. These drivers about to launch onto the roller coaster that is the Raceway at Belle Isle Park when the green flag waves. Cars are on the racetrack, the Raceway at Belle Isle Park, ready for the Verizon IndyCar Series to wave the green flag and get things started. A look at the starting lineup coming across the top of your screen. A look at the onboard cameras of drivers we'll ride with today. Marco Andretti carries the Mutual of Omaha on board. And Ryan Hunter-Reay has the AutoNation on board. There's Graham Rahal, new sponsor colors this week, the United Rentals on board. Former winner Tony Kanaan with the NTT data camera. James Hinchcliffe, the Lucas Oil on board. Helio Castroneves with a Verizon on board. Starting on the front row and alongside Castroneves on the pole, Simon Pagenaud with a Verizon on board. Enter at racewithhonda.com for a chance to start a Verizon IndyCar Series race in the Honda two-seat IndyCar driven by Mario Andretti. Today it's Gilles de Ferran in the front seat, and Carol Brown riding along. Enjoy your trip, Carol. Look at the head pop forward when Gilles hits the brakes. All right, final stories from pit road as we're on one to go. Doc?
Hey, despite a misfire that produced a disappointing 19th place finish in last week's Indy 500, Simon Pagenaud has had the hottest hand in the Verizon IndyCar Series, boasting 3 wins and 2 runner-up finishes. And the hot streak continued here yesterday when he won his 3rd pole of the year. But this morning, after final warm-up, Chevy engineers determined that there was an issue. There was a pressure spike inside the crankset of the engine, and they opted to change it for 3 reasons. Number 1, they're in the shadows of Chevy's headquarters. Number 2, this is Roger Penske's home track. And number 3, they're the points leaders. 3 good reasons to make a change. So he's out there with a brand new engine. Here's Jan.
Of course, no such dramas for Helio Castroneves, who starts just to the left-hand side on the front row to Simon Pagenaud. He missed the pole position by 1/100th of a second. And I've never seen Helio so confident here at Detroit. He says, I love my car alone, I love my car in traffic, and on both types of Firestone rubber. And Rick, that could be a very potent combination today.
Well, Jan, one driver hoping to break up that Penske party is Carlos Munoz. He was hugely disappointed after finishing 2nd last week at the Indy 500. Thought he should have won, but he came out very confident. Add to that the fact that he won one of the 2 races here last year, and he's feeling pretty good going into this race. But there's a wild card. He's the only driver in this entire field of cars that's chosen to start on the black standard tires, the primary tires. It's a strategy move, and we're about to find out whether it's going to pay off for Carlos Munoz.
Eric, the 2 different tire compounds, very much a conversation and part of the play that will decide the outcome of this race. Quick reminder that Spanish language commentary of our broadcast today available by activating your SAP button, presented by ESPN Deportes. One car has not left the grid yet. That is Jack Hawksworth, whose car has not fired. You see the AJ Foyt team surrounding it, trying to get the car fired up so he can join the field before the green flag waves.
It is devastating to be in the pits like that right before a race, Scott.
His month didn't go well in Indianapolis, and he has not had a good weekend here so far at Detroit also.
Lights out on the pace car. It accelerates away from the field. They're lined up double wide. A very quick right-left combination starts this race as they come down to take the green flag in the first of 2 this weekend in Detroit. Munoz with the inside move. Kanaan tries to take advantage of him as they exit 3.
And the 3.
and probably scripted from the team meeting they would have. And when you're running for Roger Penske, you certainly don't want to make a mistake, especially at his home track.
There's two places you don't want to make a mistake at. Indy is one, the other one is here in Detroit.
Tricky spot here, end of the long straightaway, turn 7. Seen a number of drivers, and one in particular, have a lot of problems in that corner this weekend. As the field gets settled in, we'll see if that comes into play.
Now, from what we heard in practice, whoa, that was close.
Yeah, and that was actually a bolt that was on the ground, guys, that one of the cars just drove over. So not a piece of debris. That looked like a bolt. And we have actually had some sedans running on this course previous to this race, so that's something to watch out for.
So if the tires ran as they did yesterday, we expect the drivers with the red tires, which are the softer compound, to come in early because
He could be beginning to be played as early as the second lap of this race while we watch the action on the track, and Will Power make a move on Takuma Sato. Let's bring in Jan Beekes to talk more about that. Jan?
And Will Power, of course, is trying to move forward. We're watching him on those red sidewall tires. Now, he will push hard, as will everyone except for Carlos Munoz. You heard Rick DeBrule say he is the only one on those primary tires. The key is, they say after 10 laps, these softer red sidewall tires are going to fall off a cliff, is the term. Expect cars to come onto pit road early and make it a 3-stop strategy.
All right, so we'll keep an eye again. I was told anywhere from lap 2 to lap 4, we'd begin to see some of the drivers trickle onto pit road from there to get the minimum 2 laps. Hinchcliffe and Kanaan.
You know, we expected this out of the Penske cars. I spoke with Simon Pagenaud just after the drivers' meeting this morning, and I said, you look very comfortable in the car. I don't want to say it looks easy, because I know it's not from sitting in it previously myself, especially in this rough racetrack, but he says we have more left to go.
Here's the first move.
And they're putting blacks on the harder compound.
Marco Andretti. Gabby Chavez. And Spencer Pigot leaving, picking up a ride for the street and road courses this year for Ed Carpenter Racing.
Pagenaud, as Jan mentioned, just a little bit quicker than Helio Castroneves. Both these guys very confident. To finish off my thought in my conversation with Simon, he said, you know something, I'm in control of the car. It is so good to drive. And he said, I think I have a little bit more left when I need it. And that's exactly what looks like what's happening right now.
It seems that the Penske cars really excel on this bumpy track. They do a lot of work with their shock absorbers, and it just gives them more control to the drivers. And when you have that control, those walls are not as present. And every time that suspension goes up and down, the tires are unloading themselves, so it's very difficult to have constant grip. Kanaan in the pits. And off go those reds.
Charlie Kimball, Takuma Sato, Joseph Newgarden, Ryan Hunter-Reay, and Sebastian Bourdais also pitting on this third, now 4th lap of the race.
So Munoz with the blacks is in 5th position, 7.2 seconds behind the leader.
There's Bourdais filing out of the pits and falling in just behind Marco Andretti, who stopped the lap before.
As we watch the cars go around here, just watch how violently they go over the bumps. And you were talking about how good the Penske cars get around this race course. As a driver here, you're looking for compliance over those bumps, so the wheels spend a little bit more time on the ground. It makes the car easier to drive. Now look at the suspension as we look rearward here on Simon Pagenaud's car. Over the bumps, and every time you go over a bump, the driver feels that sitting in the cockpit.
It's strong at bottom end. It'll keep on getting better. It's learning as we go here. We just got to get a couple laps in here.
Now that bumpiness in a straightaway is not a problem, but when you're braking at 150 miles an hour and trying to get down to 60, it is very difficult to control the car, especially if somebody's breathing down your neck trying to get by you, because you will push the limit a little bit more, and we've seen many cars spin under braking.
You see the bumps right there.
When the wheels are off the ground, it's harder to control the car.
Cars don't do well when the wheels are off the ground.
Here, the concrete area, we call the Fountain District. And as the drivers are now going to start going through turns 11, 12, 13, going down the front stretch, up to 160 miles an hour, 3 times a lap here. And drivers are all saying that this track has become bumpier than it was last year.
Look at the cars hop at the top of the screen there.
Yeah, and you feel that, Alan. You go through those corners and it's pounding up through your spine. Your neck is tired, your arms are tired, your wrist is tired from driving around here today. We got to come back and do it again tomorrow.
It's a big, challenging weekend. A couple of more pit stops. Graham Rahal was in. Mikhail Aleshin was in. And Alexander Rossi made a pit stop on the last circuit around. Carlos Munoz has posted the fastest lap of the race. And remember, he started on the primary black tires. There goes Connor Daly off of pit road. Normally, a caution in the early laps is a regularly frequent thing in these races here at Belle Isle. But we haven't seen one yet, and if you were planning on one to play your strategy, you might already have to be recalculating.
I was almost going to say that before we came up to the start, but I didn't want to jinx it. Now you see Connor Daly just came out of the pit lane. He's being passed by cars because his tires are freshly on the vehicle. They are cold, as we call it. Tire pressures are not up. The temperatures are not up. So smartly that he's actually starting to give some space to the other guys so they can get through without causing a problem.
He almost lost it coming out of the pits. Look at this.
On the gas, over 700 horsepower.
You were talking about a yellow?
Yeah, but you don't want to be the yellow.
That was a almost yellow.
Will Power has made the move to pit road as Andretti goes to the inside of Daly.
It would take a full lap for Daly to get those tire pressures and temperatures up.
There's Will Power. Watching all this play out so far strategically, Jan.
And what is so interesting is that the leaders right now are running in what we would call the danger zone. You just talked about it's very frequent that you'd have a caution period early in the race. If right now there was a yellow, Simon Pagenaud that you're watching, Castroneves behind, they'd get caught behind the pace car, and all the other cars that have pitted, and I gather that's 14 or 15 cars, would vault themselves right to the front of the order. That's why people are diving into the pits early, for insurance. Rick?
Well, in fact, we were talking with Carlos Munoz's crew right before the race, and they were hoping for a long period of green without yellow. So they say this type of situation is actually playing into their hands perfectly because, once again, he was using the black tires, the standard tires. As a result, he can go a little bit longer. He wants it to go green as long as possible so he can take advantage. When everybody else starts to dive in, he'll be able to continue on with those black tires. But he's got to get ahead of that car ahead of him with Hinchcliffe. Doc?
Yeah, and some of the guys like Scott Dixon and Simon Pagenaud, their strategists wanted to make sure they ran at least 8 laps early in this race on the red tires because they could make it on 2 more stops and not have to worry about fuel. Scott Dixon will be coming in this time to make the change from red to black, and the reason again is they want to be able to be comfortable with 2 more stops on fuel.
Looking at these 2 front Penske cars, the red tires are not slowing them down at all.
Simon did tell me this morning, he said, I can get to 12 laps. After that, they start to go off, and I believe Jan was using the term they fall off a cliff, and that's what all the drivers are saying. Great until that point, and then they start to go off, and you have to come in, get them off the car because you're costing yourself time on the racetrack.
But the better a car works, the less they use their tires. So if you can make your car work over all these bumps like the 2 Penske drivers are doing, they can stretch that out as long, and the longer they stretch it out, the more an advantage they will have.
The beautiful setting for this race course.
Watch the speed build here. Should be up around 160, 62 miles an hour.
Pagenaud's putting some distance between himself and Castroneves. The gap is now up to 1.5 seconds.
And look how abusive it is in the steering wheel every time we're on the onboard. And Scott Dixon, he's going slow, guys.
In the pits.
Here's the stop. We heard up from pit road a minute ago. Expected right about now. Trouble fueling the car. Trouble fueling. Can't get fuel in the car. Massive, massive problem for Scott Dixon.
And there's no words to explain that. No need of words to explain that.
See, now he'll take the inside line to defend, to try to keep an inside line because he's on cold tires. Hopefully not lose as many spots as he would be if he was on the outside and people dive on the inside of him.
He's already lost a ton of ground. If everybody else is making 8-second pit stops to refuel, he was sitting still for 21 seconds. Ouch.
That's probably 1/5 of a lap.
Montoya is in, as is Hinchcliffe. Got trouble and a full course yellow. Max Chilton has just contacted the barrier.
This puts Dixon right back in play again.
And what Jan was just talking about, the danger zone for Simon Pagenaud and Helio Castroneves. They have not pitted, and the cautions come out.
Yeah, just something gave way. Sorry, boys.
So Max Chilton, the rookie driver from England, he's over in that fountain area of the course.
See how bumpy the course is? I thought I heard him say something about a suspension breakage. The car wouldn't turn for him.
He's in the straightaway.
Just went directly into the wall. So, boy, what a helpless feeling that is, Eddie. Both you and I have had that before.
I know, he was very lucky it happened where it did. He was just in the straightaway and just slowly edged his way into the wall. Very, like you've been saying, it's a very, very bumpy circuit. If you were to imagine a circuit that is exactly the opposite of Indianapolis, which is as smooth as a pancake and always a high constant speed, you'd have to say it's Detroit.
Absolutely. It's a street circuit, and you can't come test here ahead of time. So for a lot of drivers here, it's their first time coming to this circuit. And when you talk about a street circuit, remember, it's the crown in the road that drivers have to deal with. You turn into a turn, and you come from the center of the turn. You go up over the crown of the middle of the road, as I call it, back down the other side. The back end wants to come out from underneath you. You're trying to put the power down. All those things are different. And then you have to contend with all the bumps, the manhole covers that are there, so you're driving a bit of a different line than you might do on a regular circuit shaped like this. But it all comes down to remembering the bumps in the road, staying away from the danger zones, and trying to keep off the wall.
So, terrible break for Simon Pagenaud and Helio Castroneves as caution comes out while almost everyone else in the field has made a green flag pit stop except those two and Carlos Munoz, who was on a different strategy anyway. Back at Belle Isle, where we're under caution for the first time of the race after Max Chilton said he had a suspension piece he thought fail on his car, threw him into the wall at the end of the backstretch. It came out when Simon Pagenaud, the leader, 22, and Helio Castroneves, the car right behind him, are the only two still on the softer red sidewall tires who've not made an early laps pit stop. They come to the pit opening here, and pit lane is open.
And let's remember, it's true they're the only ones on red, but they were not losing pace when they were running on red. They might be able, Scott, to stretch this out all the way to the end of their need for fuel.
Well, they might be trying to do this on a two-stop now if that's the case. We didn't think they'd get that far in the reds. Everybody was saying they wanted them off there early, as we saw a lot of the other teams elect to do. So, but as you mentioned, Eddie, if your car is working real well, you're not that abusive on the tires, and the pit strategy maybe will change.
Doc is in the Pagenaud pit.
Down here in Simon Pagenaud's pit, they were preparing to bring Simon in. They were getting ready to call him in when the yellow came out on a lap. And so what happened is that when they realized how well he was running, and Kyle Moyer said, okay, you're a half a second quicker than anybody else on black tires. So now we're opting, why don't we just stay out 12 more laps and run a full stint, which would mean they could make this possibly on two stops. So now the call is to leave him on the racetrack on the reds, which wear pretty significantly.
Yeah, the car's not the only thing that gets adjusted. The strategy gets adjusted as circumstances present. They might lose less time with a green flag pit stop than with a caution flag pit stop that sends them all the way to the back of the line. Yellow out for Max Chilton's crash in the first caution of the race after 11 now of 70 laps. We are back to the Motor City after a word from your ABC station. Still working the cleanup here at the raceway at Belle Isle Park in the Detroit River adjacent to downtown. Max Chilton's crash has scrambled the field just a little bit, and they're still kind of sorting it out. We heard Doc from Simon Pagenaud's pit a minute ago. Let's hear from Jan, who's got the story on Helio Castroneves.
And I like the way you said it, Alan. Its strategy is adjusted based on conditions. And the fact they're running behind the pace car now, we thought that they were running in a danger zone, so they knew they'd go to the back of the pack. So why not, like Doc said, stay out. They're fast. If they can get to lap 20, Roger Penske making the calls for Helio Castroneves, it would then turn into a two-stopper for them. So very interesting. As the game changes here, the more caution they have, it'll play into Castroneves' hands. Rick?
Well, for Carlos Munoz, they were hoping that both Pagenaud and Castroneves were going to come into the pits because they were counting on this being the gravy time when they were going to go out, run fast laps, and have those guys move to the back. So it's kind of gotten in the way of their strategy. The new strategy, save fuel. Rob Edwards, a strategist on the radio, talking to Carlos Munoz, saying save fuel, save fuel. He's constantly been preaching that during this yellow flag.
All right, Rick, and one other wrinkle that may force further adjustment of strategies. There are some rain showers to the west of us that could bring everyone back to pit road for wet tires if they hit. We'll see. A lap away from the restart. We'll be back for the green flag. Aerial coverage brought to you by DirecTV. If you call yourself a sports fan, you gotta get DirecTV. And before the restart, a word about the NBA Finals here on ABC, continuing with Game 2 tomorrow night. Cleveland at Golden State. Warriors up 1-0 following their Game 1 win at home on Thursday. We start at 7:30 Eastern with NBA Countdown, and of course it streams live on Watch ESPN and the ESPN app. Terrific Game 1, and we look for it to be a terrific series in the NBA Finals. And so here at Detroit, even though we're very early going in this first of the two Duel in Detroit races, there's a lot of thick plot here.
I feel like we're playing a three-dimensional chess game. Weather's a part of it, tires are part of it, fuel's a part of it.
And a green flag is a part of it as they come to the restart. Two Penske cars make moves. Power and Montoya now side by side.
And Montoya loses another position.
That's Munoz who gets by him. Strong move from Will Power there in the 12 to get two at once into turn 3.
Everybody in the pits is going to be watching to see what the performance of Pagenaud and Castroneves are with those red tires. The bet is against them.
This is the bumpiest section of the track that we talked about before. Over all this concrete, a lot of drivers saying the track is a little bit rougher than it was last year. I think a lot of this island was come together when they used to do some repairs on expressways. They used to come along and take a lot of the old concrete and just put it into the edge of the island to build the island out. And I don't think it sits very well over the winter. It seems like every time you come back here, the island has moved and it creates a bumpier surface. Such a fast section through there, turns 1 and 2 to 160 miles an hour, and then through that section there about 120-25 miles an hour up over the bridge area there. We saw a lot of cars crash last year.
Oh, that's right at the last moment, and he pulls it off.
Garden. And Scott Dixon trying to make up some ground in the red car.
And you see the green flashing on the side of the car by the roll hoop. Drivers have the push to pass button on the steering wheel so they can push it to give them a momentary extra power. A lot of people are doing that down the straightaway, so every time you see the green flashing on the side of the roll hoop, they've been using their push to pass. It looked like they had a few cars there, including Dixon's, with the green PP, push to pass, flashing.
Now the drivers have a way of communicating amongst themselves. If somebody cuts you off, you can almost be sure you'll get that favor repaid at some point in the race. And Dixon and Andretti are having a serious battle right now.
When we're talking to the push, have nothing left at the end of the race when you might need it.
Dixon is determined to get by Marco Andretti.
And I would say he's a tad angry.
Let's see here, coming up to one of the best passing spots in the course.
This one's over. This discussion's over here. He's going to get by him.
And you saw the 15 on the roll hoop. That's telling you the position the car is in. That red number 15. Now he moves up to 14.
Marco was very smart that he just filtered in right behind on the exit.
Down the long straightaway. That's not a straightaway. We'll call it the back stretch because it kinks a couple of times to heavy braking turn 7.
So Alan, we're into lap 16 and the two Penske cars are still pulling away from the rest of the field.
You watch Marco Andretti and Alexander Rossi, the Indy 500 winner, directly behind him. Speaking to those guys, everybody in the Andretti team says their cars have not been compliant. The word that we used, Eddie, you and I, about the Penske cars, the cars go over the bumps very easy. But they were really having difficulty getting their cars to be compliant. And when they're not compliant, you can't put your foot on the gas and you can't get out of the turns very quickly.
Pagenaud is pulling away from Castroneves. He has been on a tear this year. Every time we've been on a road course, he's been the one to beat.
So those three drivers have not stopped. We expected Munoz to run a long first stint because he started on the harder tires. Pagenaud and Castroneves caught out by the caution, but running first and second and continuing to evaluate and update their strategy, Doc.
Yeah, Kyle Moyer has said to his team, but now not to his driver, just to his team, this is a survival call I made. He said, we really need rain in the next 5 to 10 minutes now, basically the next 3 to 5 minutes before these tires are gone and we're a sitting duck. He said, this rain may not work out. It may miss us, which would not be a good situation for us. Right now they're hoping for a few sprinkles, which I felt one just a moment ago.
Yeah, Doc, I'm watching, as you know, always during the race very carefully weather radar and some of my various weather apps. Light rain beginning in just a few minutes. It'll be brief, then it'll stop, then there'll be about 40 minutes, and it'll start again. So this could really throw the whole race into a big spin here, and perhaps some drivers into one too. Just saying. And perhaps our close when we get back to the hotel later on tonight. Simon Pagenaud leading in Detroit. A look from Helio Castroneves' car, and a reminder to download IndyCar Mobile to access exclusive live in-car cameras, hear driver and pit crew chatter, and more, only on Verizon. Castroneves now running to match his car number, P3. That's Will Power ahead of him, who's gone by, and some moisture on the camera lens.
And the tricky part about that is, as a driver, you're starting to get it on your visor also. So do you have to guesstimate when you're going down that long stretch at 160 plus miles an hour, how damp is the track?
Now, that's Simon Pagenaud, and that is nearly 6 seconds back to now
3 laps. He's trying to put as much distance. Oh, this is not a little bit of rain. This is a lot of rain in that area.
Remember we talked about it can be raining at one end and not at the other. Right now it seems like it's starting to come in from the south end onto the island, so these drivers will be aware of that. Once they get it onto their visors, they'll be reporting back to the pit lane also, telling them what they're feeling out there.
All of those weather apps and radars and things that we're talking about, the pit crews and the strategists all have them in front of them, and they're all factoring that into how they might gain their driver an advantage over when is the time to get on the wet tires or get off of them and gain some ground.
But if you don't get a lot of rain, you don't put the wet tires on, because it only lasts a lap and a half, and then they're destroyed. So you've got to really wait for the rain to come down before the rain tires have a positive effect. And this guy is on a tear. He's now 6.5 seconds ahead of Power, who is running on blacks.
So the pit window for the race
6.2
is now open for Simon Pagenaud, and we'll see as he comes up to pit entry here, right side of the screen, that yellow area, he'll go by another lap.
Because of those caution laps that we had, that plays into his favor.
6.5.
That's the team telling him the distance between himself and the car behind him. So Eddie, you surmise that he's pushing his foot on the gas, trying to get as much of a gap in between as possible. That's probably what he is doing. But the key thing is that he's done such a great job driving on these red tires that he told me after the drivers' meeting this morning, I think 12 or 15 laps is all it has. Yes, we've had some yellow laps right now. But
Overtake, pit on this lap, overtake.
Okay, so there you go. Overtake this lap, get a big stretch going down the straightaway, maybe gain another second or so. They're going to pit on this lap. Let's wait and see.
And now we're going to see how good his pit crew is at changing tires and giving him fuel. Watching the Penske pit crew is always a pleasure because they really know how to do their job.
And Eddie, we talk about the pressure on the drivers all the time. There is pressure on the crew also, as we see the 22 of Simon Pagenaud now, and he'll start to head towards the pits. If that's what we heard on his radio, let's watch.
Here he comes. 50 miles an hour, pit road speed limit. His pit all the way at the far end.
Wide open. Sticker black's going on.
And the same crew that made an engine change in less than 2 hours now goes to work to try to make a tire change in 6 seconds or less. Simon Pagenaud's first stop of the day. Getting fuel in, and he is away in just over 8 seconds with black stickers going on.
And that is how it's done. He's got to get these tires as warm as quickly as he can, Scott. Otherwise, he's a whole gaggle of cars behind him.
And try not to brake too hard at the end. It's easy to do. Try not to lock up the tires because you'll flat spot them. Then you have to live with them for the next little while. That's 27. Marco Andretti right behind him.
And Marco's not one of them himself. If they don't get around Pagenaud the next 2 or 3 corners, his tires will be up to temperature. This is a perfect spot right here at the end of the straightaway.
Look at the power down that he has on the gas pedal, stretches it on power down. Let's watch here.
Munoz and Castroneves both in. Rick?
Carlos Munoz brings it in. They've been talking fuel strategy. They told him they only expected a small shower. No chance of putting rain tires on, Jan.
Situation for Castroneves. He gets his black stickers. He launches ahead of Munoz, but obviously you can see the cars streaming by on the track. They're going to lose a lot of track position. But again, this was all because they did not take advantage of the early stops, that dangerous.
He's represented the sport and himself and his sponsors well all week, all over the United States. Rossi running in 14th. Will Power is now the second leader of this race. On board with Ryan Hunter-Reay as we look ahead already to the second of the Doolin Detroit races. ABC, same time, 3:30 Eastern tomorrow. Such a difficult task for these teams to turn these cars around overnight, qualify again tomorrow morning, race again tomorrow. But that's the challenge, and they'll all take it willingly. We'll also stream it live on Watch ESPN and the ESPN app, of course. More pit stops, Doc.
Charlie Kimball making his second stop of the day, trying to get the outside rear tire on, getting the wheel nut, a little bit of a delay, waiting on fuel. And Rick.
Marco Andretti brings the car in. They were considering a wing adjustment, instead decided to go for some tire pressure changes. Think about this. He was one of the drivers who's moved up 6 places since the start of this race.
Now, Rick, these are all the people who dove onto pit road on laps 3, 4, and 5 to get off those red alternate tires. You see the lap these drivers pitted on the ticker coming across the top of your screen. Will Power doing just like Pagenaud did before. He's gotten out in front of the lead, and he is pounding out fast laps. He's just set the fast lap of the race in that 12 car. Rick?
Well, Graham Rahal brought his in. He's another one of those drivers. He stopped on lap 4, got rid of those red tires. Now he's back out.
Mikhail Aleshin and Ryan Hunter-Reay also pitting on this lap. Jan?
And for Ryan Hunter-Reay, expect this team to go for front wing. He's been asking for some front wing. There they go. They add it to try and get some more traction on the front. Again, at 8.4 seconds, this is a group that stopped earlier that is now has another stop in their future. Actually, another. So the strategy for those that are buried in the field, Pagenaud, Also Castro, Neves, and Munoz on a different strategy. These cars now dropping back in their pit stops.
And not to repeat myself, sorry, Eddie, but the rain can change all of it too.
The rain, if it does come down, it will change everything. Did you see how hard it is to blend into the racetrack, Scott?
You know, the guys have been told in the drivers' meeting to make sure that you give some space for the cars that are coming out, but as we see now, it's very difficult to do.
Here's
Pit
Will
lane,
Power.
Will Power.
And comparing where he comes out to where Pagenaud is on the racetrack when Power exits pit road will be big. Jan?
Yes, it'll be very interesting. Will Power loves his car on the black sidewall tires, and he's already run the red, so the rest of the race will be done on these blacks. He loves the way the car handles. They're waiting. You could see this could come down to strategy today and waiting for rain. So the tires were done way ahead of the fuel, but they waited on the fuel. We watched the blend to see how it works in relationship to Pagenaud. Here he comes.
Now remember, Pagenaud has hot tires on.
And you saw the green light flashing on the side of Pagenaud's car, pushed the pass because he knew that Will Power was in the pit lane. He was trying to get out in front of him.
That is a win for Will Power and Tim Cindric, his strategist. That's a win right there to get out ahead of Simon Pagenaud.
And we're only on lap 29 of 70.
Think about Simon Pagenaud last year, no wins when he moved over to the Penske team. Said it took him a good year to understand what and how the system worked over at Penske. This year, as we know, many races. Now there's another road course expert in there, Simon Pagenaud, that's taken the limelight away.
James Hinchcliffe's in, Doc.
And the Indy 500 pole sitter said, I want no changes whatsoever on the car. They asked him about a front wing. He said, no, I love the balance of the car. Just for sticker black tires, holding for fuel, trying to get out under 9 seconds. He is away at 8.2.
So the new leader of the race after Will Power pitted is Juan Pablo Montoya. He's out in front of Scott Dixon by 10 seconds. And then Power 16 seconds back in third, followed by Pagenaud and Sebastian Bourdais. We're back to the Motor City after this from your ABC station. New leader back at Belle Isle. It's Simon Pagenaud back out in front. A very interesting moment among three Penske cars. Montoya, Power, and Pagenaud. Montoya just off pit lane.
And watch Will Power on the inside. He's so strong, Eddie. We know this all the time. But he gets hung up going through turn 3. And guess who's there to take advantage of it and says, hey, guys, I'll play through. And that's all with one team.
That was a very close call.
So all the work that they did to try and get Will Power some track position undone as he's now back behind Pagenaud. And Montoya trying to fight to hold the lead coming off the pit lane and see if they could get the jump.
You know, and it's interesting because Pagenaud we thought was a little quicker possibly. And getting up to the back of Will Power is one thing, passing is another. But he just got the big helping hand going through there, so now he's going to stretch it.
Well, it's that gap now back to Will Power from the leader Pagenaud, Jan.
And very interesting, consider this, that was a bit of a payback move. You talked about on the start of the race how the three teammates worked together. Of course, Power was not part of that. Power was bowling his way through. Remember, he went down into that corner and really put an aggressive move. I believe it was on lap 2 or 3 on Montoya. Really forced the issue. And that was a payback move across teammates that really cost Will Power dearly.
We were talking about how successful Pagenaud has been this season. Let's remember he's won 3 races and finished second in 2 other ones. Every time we've been on a road course, he has either won or finished second. And now he is putting a lot of distance between his 2 teammates. As they were bickering amongst themselves, he just came along and passed him and left him.
Change for 5th place, Helio Castroneves trying to dig out of a little hole. There goes Bourdais in 4th. And now Castroneves in 5th, just getting by James Hinchcliffe.
Down the long straightaway from turn 2 to turn 3. Helio times it perfectly. Not that much of a surprise to James Hinchcliffe. But Hinch just got pushed out there just a little bit. We're right along now with James Hinchcliffe.
Inside.
Yeah, but he had a choice. He had a choice. He could, if somebody's inside of you, back off and get behind him. But if you try to hold it too long, you'll always find yourself in difficulty on the exit.
And you heard the voice from the spotter there. They have spotters up in the grandstands where the spectators are sitting, up in the top of the grandstands in turn 3, just to let the drivers know when there's somebody coming on the inside of them, just like we heard for James Hinchcliffe.
You don't use your spotter that much around here, though. I think it's really important that you use your mirrors. A spotter on an oval is vital. Around here, it's an added bonus that probably you use in 1 or 2 corners.
Honda telemetry down the long straightaway. Watch the top speed, left side. Into the 160s to make a 90-degree right-hand turn. And I want you to think about this as you're watching that speed number. Driving between 2 concrete walls in a city park.
With over 600 horsepower. Oh, did you say a bumpy city park or just a city park?
I just said a city park.
And it's understandably bumpy. It's in the Midwest. It gets very cold around here.
So James Hinchcliffe running in 6th position for the moment. 34 of 70 laps complete at the midway point of today's Doolin Detroit race. Simon Pagenaud started on pole. He's back in the lead after an interesting little scuffle. Reminder about the NBA Finals continuing tomorrow night on ABC. Game 2, Cleveland and Golden State. Warriors up 1-0. Start at 7:30 with NBA Countdown and stream it live on Watch ESPN and the ESPN app. 2 of the more compelling players in all of sports, Steph Curry and LeBron James. Game 2 tomorrow night. And here in Detroit, you look at the beautiful raceway at Belle Isle Park in the Detroit River. This event headed up by Roger Penske's organization, and his teams head up the field now, running 1, 2, 3, and 4. We talk about 2 events being of prime importance to Roger: Indianapolis and this one. Detroit is hometown, the home base for Penske Corporation, and not to mention Chevrolet, the manufacturer that the captain's team runs, their headquarters building being quite prominent in the skyline of this raceway also.
And they have really rebounded from what wasn't a very good performance in Indianapolis. And as you said, Alan, they're 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're powered by Chevys. And we are in the Motor City, so they've come back with a vengeance. And it's to be expected. Their cars have always been good on road circuits. With all these bumps, their drivers seem to be able to go over a tricky circuit faster than anybody else, and they're not using their tires that much.
The other thing that this event does that Roger is quite proud of is that the event and the events that go around it, they have a big charity gala and so on, and they raise a ton of money for the Belle Isle Conservancy, a trust basically that is preserving and refurbishing many of the things here on Belle Isle that had fallen into some disrepair over the years. They have raised millions of dollars and poured and continue to pour it back in to this park that the residents of Detroit and Michigan use year-round. And for the one weekend a year that it's taken up by the race, there's an awful lot going back into it as Pagenaud has a moment there.
And I think Power is closing the gap. He's definitely putting pressure on Pagenaud. These 2 drivers have been the 2 fastest drivers that Penske has.
There's the gap closing down as they continue, all of the Penske drivers, to press and press hard. That was Power going by Castroneves earlier. Here's the big one.
That's a surprise move.
And he kept him out there. He didn't allow him to come back in.
Montoya did a great job of keeping that car out of the barrier, by the way.
Yes, he did.
When I spoke with Juan this morning, he said, you know, if it rains, I'm not so worried about that. I sort of don't mind if it rains whatsoever. And we know that he's one of the best drivers in the rain, probably with the F1 experience. Eddie, you guys drove F1, so a lot of time you guys spend on circuits over there, sweeping circuits in the rain.
The trickiest one was Monaco in the rain.
City streets.
Big city street.
Yes. And we have a street course here that, if it gets wet, will be quite the handful. Both races last year affected by rain. The outcomes of them, I said this earlier, impacted by the strategy of when to get on and off pit road. And we continue to mention rain because if you look at the radar screen, it's kind of ugly, though it's dry for now on the racetrack. Will Power is charging. Look at him cutting into the gap.
So is Montoya. Montoya's not losing anything.
On that graphic, the gap is closing in. Just spoke with Tim Cindric, of course, is on the radio with Will Power. Says he's very happy, he likes what he's doing, but this gap that you can see between the 3 Penske cars is about aerodynamically what you want. You think, well, this is a street course, but believe it or not, there's so much aerodynamics on these cars that produce 5,000 to 6,000 pounds of downforce. There's so much air wash off of these cars. This gap you can see on screen now between Power and Montoya is about what you want to maintain so you don't wear out the tires. So right now, Power loves what he has, just kind of waiting for an opportunity to pounce if Pagenaud has to, for instance, pit early.
The fastest of those 3 cars was Montoya the last lap with a 15.1.
Now they've caught a car at the tail end of the lead lap. That is Spencer Pigot driving the Ed Carpenter Racing 20, who has just been on and off pit road back at lap 36. You see 5 laps ago. So will the traffic factor in to the spacing between these cars? Roger Penske's team with the top 4 spots in his home city. In our ABC side-by-side coverage, you saw James Hinchcliffe running 5th, spin off in turn 7 and into the tire barriers. You also saw his significant frustration at it.
So you watch him, he's coming down to turn 7 right now, and remember we said how bumpy this racetrack is? 162 miles an hour, already locked up the front wheels. He takes his foot off the brake just a little bit, tries to make the turn, carrying too much speed, ends up into the Corvette tire barrier there. And that's what you don't want to hear.
He had to make a quick decision here to try to make it around the corner or go down the escape route.
.62 or 3 miles an hour, down to try to get down to about 60 to 65 miles an hour. Very difficult.
Look at all the water on the car. Oh, that's from the barrier.
Yeah, I would
that's
assume
when
so,
you hit
right?
the barrier.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've hit those before? Get
Never.
showered with water? Yeah, never. Okay. Yeah.
I have hit everything that's on a circuit at one time or another.
Here come the leaders to pit road. Not all of them, but a number of them. Jan?
And this will be a very interesting call because it's starting to spit with rain on pit road. Do you come now and you get tires like Will Power, or do you stay out and wait for it to rain and then make your next stop? Lots of cars taking pit road, and that is a 6.9 second stop, Doc.
Simon Pagenaud making his second, what should be his final stop. Waiting to get away, gets waved off. Trying to get the car completely full of fuel.
Power off the pit lane ahead of Castroneves and ahead of Pagenaud, but not pitting. Under the caution flag, Juan Pablo Montoya, who will take over the race lead as we work the second caution flag in our duel at Detroit. We're back to the Motor City after this from your ABC station. Working the second caution of Duel in Detroit, race number 1, race 2 tomorrow here on ABC at 3:30 Eastern Time. Same drivers, same difficult course. Will it be a different outcome? We don't even know what today's outcome is yet, but I'm just saying. Tomorrow, also on Watch ESPN and the ESPN app, and again here on ABC at 3:30 Eastern Time. Our aerial coverage brought to you by DirecTV. If you call yourself a sports fan, you gotta get DirecTV. And you see on the camera lens from high above some droplets of moisture. You see it on some of the car lenses, and you see it in the Detroit River.
I think that's what caught Hinchcliffe out.
Maybe a little sprinkle there?
Just a little bit to lose grip.
And he did start to lock the wheels up going a straight line. And you know how little it takes to actually change it because you are to the very end.
Look at Will Power.
That's turn number 3. Did the track get wet over there, and did he spin around under caution? He was the first off pit road.
His engine, is it off or on?
It's off.
It's off.
That red flashing LED means he stalled it. Or it
under
has stalled.
yellow. He went down there under yellow.
But look how wet the pavement is there.
Yeah.
Did just enough moisture get on that he spun off That's at the end of the long straightaway. Turn number 3 is where he sits.
Wow.
Bizarre.
Very.
Well, as we watch this, guys, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to him because he's sitting right there. And watch this when he comes into the turn. He's a little bit confused. Yeah, I'm not so sure that his engine was not dead at that point in time, or was something going on. There you go.
No, his engine was on, Doug.
Still running. Now it's off.
We're in front, Pagenaud.
Yeah, he's almost like I call that dead stick for some reason.
Something happened because he had lost contact with the pack ahead of him, and you heard Castroneves there clutching the car.
Shift emergency on.
So there's an emergency mode you can kick these cars into, and that happened to Will Power here a year ago in one of these races.
So the driver can go through a process on a steering wheel to try to get the car to reset itself, and it looks like he's trying to do that right now. So the question is the car going to restart?
That's not just a steering wheel. That's a $40,000 computer.
Oh.
Yeah, something.
That's a problem too. Jan?
Yes, I just spoke with the team, and Will Power reported on the radio that it was a gearbox issue, but you can see from that shot, that's Tim Cindric watching those same shots. Obviously, with that wheel coming off, that would affect your drive. So if he said there was a gearbox-related issue, that might be what Will Power felt, which is obviously now a huge issue for him now trying to get restarted.
He chose to go down the escape route to get out of everybody's way because he had a problem.
Well, without that right rear tire, he's going to have a hard problem driving that car back around to the pit lane.
And where is the lug
nut?
nut?
There's probably no nut. There's no nut.
So he might have been asking them to throw the tire on the car and throw the wheel nut on, but the wheel nut's not there. So obviously a problem on pit lane. And the man who came off pit road first of the cars that stopped is now stopped himself and extending this caution. Plus the ugly radar. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? So Will Power's car towed into the runoff area. That is where it will sit as the field goes back to green with 24 laps to go. There's the wheel nut, apparently off the 12 car. That's a problem. You need that to keep that tire on. So, Juan Pablo Montoya, Graham Rahal, Scott Dixon, Sebastian Bourdais, Connor Daly, Gabby Chavez. They did not pit under the yellow. They're ahead of Simon Pagenaud, now the first off the pit lane as they scramble through 1 and 2.
Rossi almost went into the wall.
Boy, Charlie Kimball just barely missed the barrier there.
What a crazy time restarts always are.
The longest history of doing well is Montoya. I don't know how to. I was going to say.
I know what you wanted to say. The most.
I was going to say tool set, but I thought that's kind of offensive. But
the most courage. How's that?
Historically, he's always done very well in these difficult conditions.
Magnificent job of self-editing at the last moment.
Great drive. Now P3.
Well, I just read the list of cars that didn't pit under this caution, right? So we've got different pit stop cycles that were tacked there.
It's 2 guys with experience. That's why that worked right there. So it probably tells you that Graham's really pushing the car as hard as possible. A slight mistake like he did. The car got a little bit loose. Allowed Dixon to have that opportunity to get up beside him.
Rahal's not somebody you can just stick your nose in and expect him to move out of the way. You have to be well alongside him.
So many things going on here. We've got strategy, we've got weather, we've got team strategists trying to combine them and figure out how to win the race in the wet and win the race in the dry, like Montoya's team.
When we go here, we're going to have to try and gap, but save some for us to help, if that makes any sense. Not really. I'll post it. Basically, the rain, if the rain comes on our window there, it'd be a perfect scenario. So we want to use as little fuel as possible in order to make a gap. That's what we're trying to do, is play the rain game and the dry game at the same time.
I want you to go fast, not use any fuel in both conditions, dry and wet.
And hope that it rains at just the right time, if it's going to rain.
It's all about being in the right time on your fuel.
Chavez trying to work around a lap car, the 20 of Spencer Pigot. There's Castroneves trying to work through. Chavez in 6th place. Castroneves in 7th.
Nice job Gabby Chavez is doing, a former Indy Lights champion. Everybody that's worked with him has touted him as so talented. Good feedback to the engineers, but a lot of dicing going on right through here. Lotion really getting through. Nice job.
Got by Ryan Hunter-Reay. Now Hunter-Reay tries to come back. This the run down to turn 7, where heavy braking comes in.
Yeah, Ryan Hunter-Reay is going to say, you know what, take that. Yeah, I could see that one coming.
Wow. And following Hunter-Reay through.
That's what happened.
Unfortunately for these drivers, this is all for 11th, 12th, and 13th.
You know, I've always said sometimes you drive harder at the back of the pack to finish 12th or 15th than the guy does at the front, because it bumps. It's just, it's miserable sometimes if your car is not working well.
Absolutely, but a good rule of thumb is if there's a car ahead of you, try to pass it. And there's a whole bunch ahead of you here.
Is that what we do? They paid you for that, right?
I thought that's what they paid you for.
I'm thinking of a line from a movie several years ago that said the first rule of race driving, what's behind me doesn't concern me.
You are so busy.
It was said a little more colorfully than that, by the way.
So busy around here.
So Montez, then Castroneves in 7th, Simon Pagenaud back in 8th, who's done a lot of the leading in this one. I feel like we've still got a few more twists of plot still to come. Rain on the lenses from time to time here in the raceway at Belle Isle as we watch Juan Pablo Montoya leading in this Verizon IndyCar Series race. A look from Helio Castroneves' car as we remind you to download IndyCar Mobile to access exclusive live in-car cameras, hear driver and pit crew chatter, and more only on Verizon. Castroneves running in 6th. So there are the top 3. Montoya, Rahal, and Dixon. Fuel to the finish when they make their last pit stops. That's even leaving weather out of it. We heard the radio from Montoya's car a little while ago before this restart. 31, Graham Rahal at 28, Scott Dixon at 31, Sebastian Bourdais 35. The other guys like Simon Pagenaud that pitted under caution stopped at 43 of the 70-lap distance.
So you almost have to say from Helio, who pitted on lap 43, and everyone behind him.
Rahal's in the pits. Rahal in the pits.
Graham, Rick?
Well, the rule for Graham Rahal was a lot different than Montoya. They told him to go as fast as you can, and we're going to continue to go as fast as you can. Just a moment ago, they came on the radio. They told him he was the fastest car on the track. His only job now, go as fast as he can for the rest of this race and hope it doesn't rain hard.
He's going to come out behind Pagenaud and a few others.
Now we'll see if Dixon can close the gap on Montoya.
Remember, Scott, get the fueling hose coupled in properly to get fuel into the race car. He fell all the way back to 15th place at that point. He's been digging out of that hole since. And with all the various twists and turns we've had in this race, for now, he runs 2nd for now. The Penske team has made its way out to the turn 3 runoff area and brought a new right rear wheel and attached it to Will Power's car. So they are they going to refire that car and allow him to rejoin the race?
That's going to be hard to come out of there because there's cars that are still racing, and if they have a problem, they'll have to use that exit, the escape route.
Looks like the wheel is on. He's sitting there waiting for the Humultor safety crew to come along and restart him. But I'm like you, I'm not sure that they're going to go over and visit to do that.
I wouldn't do it. Dixon is closing the gap, and he will be on Montoya in probably half a lap.
I was just checking with race control, and Will Power will not be allowed to rejoin the race under green from there. That's a safety runoff. You can't have a car coming the other way with traffic, possibly conflicting with that.
Murphy's Law. If you're doing something like that, it will happen.
Yeah. Tires in the pit lane for Montoya. Is the word we get from Doc.
So the inside wheel of Montoya's car hang in the air there as he's going through that Fountain Square area.
There's an overabundance of talent and experience with these two drivers. They are giving it everything they can.
Hit the slap.
Here's the call for Montoya. Dixon will go through at least one more.
Gonna be wide open. Look for your board. Take care coming in. 5 away. 3, 2, 1. Hit your mark. Go, go, go. Gonna need to push here, bud.
There goes Pagenaud by.
With those cold tires on, these first 3 corners are really, really difficult, but that's where you have to make up the most time, Scott.
You know, but with Juan Pablo, all that experience that he has, as you mentioned before, he gets after it. I've never seen anybody so laid back. When you ask him a question like I mentioned this morning about the rain, he goes, yeah, whatever, it's okay.
So now Scott Dixon leading. When will we see him break to the pit lane, and how will he come out in relationship to Pagenaud and to Montoya? And we still haven't seen Helio Castroneves on the pit lane as well. Here comes Dixon.
One on the way out.
Just a little slower on the pit stop on that one.
There goes Castroneves and Pagenaud. Castroneves is actually on the same pit cycle as Pagenaud, so he's ahead of him in that whole line. So there they are, 1, 2,
yeah.
and now Montoya by Dixon, who
Dixon
seems
has
to
a
be
problem.
having trouble getting up to speed. Scott Dixon off the pace, not coming up to speed off the pit lane.
Just wondering if he's had a problem with the transmission. That looked like a drive issue.
Yeah, it's a gearbox.
What do you got there?
He's stuck in second. They have had no luck this season. No luck at all.
When you say that, you know, that whole Indy 500, watching that whole event, and it was hardly ever talking about Scott Dixon, which is a rarity as far as the 500 is concerned, because you obviously a previous winner and a guy that probably could have won it a couple more times. But interesting to see if this pulls out a yellow guy, because he's what we call almost dead stick here.
This is really dangerous because that corner's a little bit blind there. He's got to get to the right.
Now he's got some drive again. You see
There
him
you go.
moving
Yep.
forward. But the driver's second in the championship, having difficulties.
Now, as we talked about before, there's things that drivers can do inside the cockpit with the steering wheel to try to recycle the ignition.
So Dixon in trouble. And the lap's winding down. 14 to go. Sebastian Bourdais, the leader. Connor Daly second. Helio Castroneves and Simon Pagenaud, along with Juan Pablo Montoya, the rest of the top 5. Great street fight.
We can take Daly out of it because he's going to have to pit pretty soon. So Bourdais and Castroneves and Pagenaud all stand a very good chance of finding themselves right at the front pretty soon. Great battle. Look how close they're running to each other. There's not half a foot.
Well, as we talked about before, and Jan chronicled that when you're running that close to a car in front, your car is sliding a little bit, so you start to wear the tires off. Now, for Juan Pablo Montoya, who pitted a little later, tires are a little fresher. He's getting close, guys, because he wants to get by Simon Pagenaud that's ahead of him.
Because right ahead of Pagenaud is Castroneves.
But again, Bourdais is 4 seconds up the road ahead of these 3.
And he's putting a gap between them.
There he is, 11. Now, he won one of these 2 races last year. And there's Graham Rahal right behind, trying to join the fight. Montoya inside of Pagenaud. And he's through.
Perfectly clean pass. Now we'll see what Montoya can do on Castroneves. Montoya's closing the gap. And he's by.
Yeah, I think that they're letting Montoya go off and chase Sebastian Bourdais, because I think that they're wondering now whether or not Helio Castroneves will be able to make it on fuel along with Simon Pagenaud. Are they maybe a couple laps short?
Can Montoya run down Bourdais? When will Connor Daly pit? Who wins in Detroit? We find out after this from your ABC station. Looking at Connor Daly, who when we left you was the race leader. He's just gone on and off pit road for a splash of fuel and come out second.
He is driving his heart out.
Our Honda telemetry.
He came out of pit lane, used the push to pass. He has 2 of those left, as does Sebastian Bourdais. So now he needs to push as hard as he can, see if he can get closer to Sebastian. We'll watch the times for you and let you know the speeds that those guys are doing.
Sebastian is a very strong competitor when it comes at the end of these races.
I'd call him a closer.
Yeah, he is. You're right. He's a closer. Look at Daly braking right at the limit. His tires keep smoking on the way into the corners. This is his chance to win an IndyCar.
Well, if there's a young man, a young American that can drive a car to the limit, it's certainly Connor. From all his experience in Europe, you spoke about driving at Monaco. He got a chance to drive at Monaco, thought that was a thrill because his dad drove at Monaco in F1.
So, Sebastian Bourdais' team has worked the strategy to get their driver the lead with 8 laps to go. Jan?
And of course you say, how did they do that? How did Sebastian Bourdais get in the lead and Connor Daly right behind? Well, remember, everyone who stopped on lap 43, that was 27 laps to go. It means they went into ultra conservative mode. That would be Castroneves, Pagenaud. At the meantime, these 2 cars you're watching, they were full gas. They went for it. They each made a pit stop and did not take tires. They only took enough fuel to get them to the end. They have plenty of fuel. These 2 cars in the screen, Montoya is trying to chase them down because he stopped later. But right now, Bourdais is in the catbird seat because of some very clever strategy on pit road.
I think Montoya's running out of time. It's going to be between these first 2 cars, Bourdais and Daly.
See Montoya not even in the frame. There he is, 3 seconds back, 7 laps to go, and charging hard. Bourdais, last year in the Sunday race here at Detroit, was part of a group that was first off pit road that made the move 2 slicks from rain tires. He restarted 5th then, took the lead at lap 51 when a bunch of others pitted. Then there were so many restarts. At the end of that race, he had to survive one after the other, 6 restarts. With the lead, he had...
It's raining with these cameras or not.
Bourdais, the native of Le Mans, France, so excited about after the race next weekend at Texas, heading to his hometown to run the 24-hour of Le Mans sports car race.
He doesn't need the traffic in front of him right now. It's going to be very difficult to get by these 2 cars.
Hinchcliffe, who's laps down after his problem earlier, gives way.
That's how you do it. That's a favor that will be repaid to him at some point in the year.
Bourdais so dominant in open wheel racing back during the split era, if you will, in the kart series. Won 4 consecutive titles. Says then he was the big dog with the big team. Now he's with a smaller team, and he really relishes coming in and beating the big teams at their own game.
Scott, you are absolutely right. He is a closer.
You know, it's one of the quietest guys in the paddock. That's the funny thing about it. He puts that helmet on, and he just goes, you know, into this mode that he attacks. It's amazing.
He's quiet until he gets angry. I've seen him have the odd argument.
Well, there was a little bit of discussion going on in the drivers' meeting this morning, and Sebastian was involved in that also, about some qualifying that we had earlier yesterday about drivers not being happy with each other, and so the drivers' meeting this morning got quite heated. And, you know, so he's one that voiced his opinion. But, I think it's just a fall off of everything that goes on from Indy. If you don't have a good Indy 500 and you come here to Detroit, you're so anxious to do so very well.
The gap is now 3.4 seconds between Bourdais and Daly, and Montoya is another 3 seconds behind Daly. 4 seconds.
Talked about Bourdais getting ready to go run in his hometown of Le Mans. He and Scott Dixon and some others going to go over there after the race at Texas Motor Speedway a week from today. They're going to run the 24-hour race immediately after the race a week from tomorrow. Going to come back to the United States to go do a tire test at Watkins Glen the following afternoon.
It's a lot of driving.
It's a lot of flying. And Connor Daly having a terrific day. Dale Coyne again. I've said it a few different times, so good at working the strategy, and he's done it again to put his young driver in position for a podium.
You mentioned mid-sized teams, small teams. You'd have to really say Dale Coyne's one of the smaller teams here, and you mentioned, Alan, about the strategy. How many times has he put a driver up there with a chance of winning?
And if you're a driver, that's all you ask, right? Give me a chance.
Especially when you're a rookie like Daly. To be a rookie and find yourself in second position, that's impressive. The gap is now 3.2 between Bourdais and Daly.
And Connor's doing about the same speed right now that Sebastian Bourdais is, about a 1:16.1, a 1:16.2. I thought Montoya was going to have something for Connor Daly, but his speeds that last time around was, about a second slower, 1.17. So it doesn't seem like he's in the attack mode right now, or doesn't have the car that he can run that speed. We thought earlier in this race that it was going to be all Penske, because we saw Penske 1, 2, 3, 4, then 1 to 3, and it might just be a time again when Roger doesn't have one of his cars winning here at his hometown race.
It never comes down to how good your car is doing in the middle of the race. It always is right at the end that it counts. Look at Daly. He's keeping up. He just took a 10th off the distance between him and Bourdais, but Bourdais is in traffic, a lot of traffic.
Marco Andretti, 27. Mikhail Aleshin in 7, just ahead of the race leader.
In their 4th position. Marco cannot pull over, because if he does, Aleshin will pass him, so he has to take care of Aleshin first. And Bourdais has to find a way to navigate around both of them. And now we only have 3 laps to go.
Now for Connor Daly, he's seen this exchange happen up in front, so he digs a little deeper, pushes a little more.
Left bud, be sensible.
That's Jimmy Vasser from the KV Racing team. He says be sensible, trying to calm his driver down, so no doubt that he's getting very excited. Jimmy Vasser, a past driver and past champion.
But Connor Daly getting closer and closer in the mirrors as Bourdais is hung in traffic.
This is when you grab the steering wheel a little tighter and your heart rate's going up. There goes Sebastian.
They're having quite the fight. And Marco lets him by. That's a perfect bit of driving. Perfect.
Well, I'll tell you that those two guys are buddies, Marco and Connor. So.
All right, we're plus 1 now.
Bourdais gets very sideways. Daly has closed the gap to under second.
Wheel two, back to 2.
2 laps to go.
So Connor got close enough just to get a bit of a feel and a smell for it, but it looks like for certain Sebastian has the faster car. We'll just watch to see if we can gap him a little bit more on this lap. A little bit more traffic up ahead.
That's just Aleshin. And other than he, there is no one ahead for about half a mile ahead of Aleshin.
If Daly can just
stopped a bit.
If Daly can just get a little bit closer, he'll start filling up Bourdais' mirrors, and that is always a problem when somebody is that close.
A week ago in Indianapolis, Sebastian Bourdais' team used the same fuel strategy. as winner Alexander Rossi to get a 10th place finish out of what had been a very difficult month on the oval track. He spent the week between here in Detroit and Indianapolis with his family in a motorhome at the Cedar Point Amusement Park. Said it's one of the highlights of their season, a family road trip between the two races. Now he's one lap away from capping off that family road trip with a checkered flag for a second year in a row at Detroit.
So neat and tidy, so much experience, as you mentioned, Eddie. And for the Motor City right now, a Chevrolet-powered car running first.
A Honda second.
Turn 7, the final time. Half a lap to go. In open wheel racing statistics, this victory will tie Sebastian Bourdais with Bobby Unser for 6th all time as he comes to the final corners. They worked their magic on pit lane, and he did the rest. Checkered flag, and Sebastian Bourdais wins at Detroit for a second straight year.
Thank you, boys. Well, you guys made it stick today. Great strategy. Really, really good. Thank you very much.
So Kevin Kalkoven and Jimmy Vasser there. Both team owners excited for the win.
They're making a habit of winning in Detroit. Great win. They saved the day for GM and Chevy.
Hell of a drive.
Well, summed up on both sides of that radio conversation. Great strategy, got him in position, and a great drive, did the rest.
Did not put a foot wrong the whole time. That was very tricky today, Scott, wasn't it? The conditions were not easy.
I think now it's settling in. It took him a half a lap to really understand what was going on there. You know, that's the thing about this series. Not only do we have so many different various tracks coming from Indianapolis last week, now to a street course, and the guys will go off to a 1.5 mile oval next week. So the diversity of these drivers are amazing, but also the competitiveness in the series. I mean, here's a mid-level team that's coming out and beating the powerhouse teams of Penske, Ganassi, and Andretti Autosport. So I think it's one of the most competitive series here in the world.
This race had a lot. When you think about all the different things that happened in this race, from the troubles on pit road for Scott Dixon early, the accident that kind of threw Simon Pagenaud's initial pit strategy into a wrench. Will Power, one of the contenders to win, sitting in the runoff for the rest of the race with the right rear wheel missing from his car. The weather, threatening, spitting, never just opening up. And the strategy play that gets Sebastian Bourdais back into the winner's circle.
Strategy is becoming a very important component to IndyCar racing.
Well, look, when everyone has good equipment and the drivers are all good, and it's hard to find ways to gain an advantage technically, that's how you pass them.
That is a very convincing win.
And he'll need to rest well tonight because we get to come back again tomorrow.
How tired
and
do you think their hands and their forearms will be tomorrow morning?
Well, we've driven here. We understand that. I mean, it used to take a week.
Well, he doesn't have a week. He's got one good dinner and a night's sleep.
Helmet in, you gotta take the helmet off. They want to take the car helmet off.
And getting the congratulations of the team, one of the first of the car was Jimmy Vasser.
Nothing better than winning when you've worked hard for it, and they worked hard for it today here in Detroit. Sebastian Bourdais, the winner of race 1 in the duel at Detroit. More to come from the Motor City in just a minute. Little boost from Dad in victory lane. Very nice. Sebastian Bourdais, the winner at Detroit today. Jimmy Vasser there, left of the screen, taking a picture. Helped work the strategy to make it happen. The real key was the last pit stop. Bourdais, with his splash of fuel, exiting the pit lane as Helio Castroneves and Simon Pagenaud came steaming by. And watch this pit exit.
And as we've been saying the whole race, the out lap is the most important lap. He takes a defensive line, shuts the door down on Castroneves, makes it through that corner, heats up his tires, and the rest is history.
Checkered flag and first win of the season for Sebastian Bourdais. And a look now at the finishing results from today's race. Tip of the cap to Connor Daly with a podium finish.
You know, he's going to one of these races very quickly here, maybe even tomorrow in a Honda power plant. And that's not been the best package so far in road courses this year, Eddie, so it's great to see that result.
Well, I think they made a big improvement, though. That was really important today. And Alexander Rossi finishes 10th after winning Indy.
Started 17th today on a day when track position was hard to come by. Simon Pagenaud winds up 13th.
Not the result they were expecting. They were very, very strong in the middle of the race. He was very quick in the beginning, but no result.
And Scott Dixon falling out of a race for the first time in a very long time, and failed to finish here. And so that's how they ran today here at Detroit. Connor Daly standing by with Rick.
I can tell you we're getting